All right, we finished our last segment looking at the concept of reasonable suspicion, probable cause, and really looking at those levels of persuasion. And particularly we ended with what happens if you're below a 51% level? And what do you get with probable cause and reasonable suspicion? And if you're not supposed to put percentages on this level of persuasion in a court, but let's just say that, preponderance is 51%. Let's say that probable cause is 40%. Reasonable suspicion is, 10 to 25% certain. Well, what do you do with that? Okay, and here's something that is significant to really think about it, because when you are talking about people's eternal destinies, heaven and earth, heaven and hell, all these things, these are the weightiest matters that people could ever consider in their life. So how do you make them think to really analogize to, yeah, maybe I really do need to stop and think about this and investigate it? And this is why I move on to the concept, and this is on or about page 19 in the Theology Proper Part I handout, is the concept of the duty of intellectual inquiry, okay? So this, all of these levels of persuasion, now, what's the duty of an individual to gather evidence and pursue these matters? Well, there's actually a very interesting formula in what we call tort law, which we think about, it's a type of civil law, and particularly in negligence. We think about a negligence law, there's really 5 elements to a negligence case. Duty, you have breach of that duty, you have actual cause, proximate cause, and then damages. Those are the 5 elements of a negligence claim. And by the way, negligence claim, that's what you see in, personal injury. That's the, the lawyer on the back of the bus saying, hey, have you been injured? Call, right? So most of that is where we see, primarily where we see negligence law in the United States. But what's significant here is that there's a very important question in negligence law. You're talking about a duty that someone had, for example, to act safely or make something safe, okay? And then what happened is that through omission, someone breached that duty. They didn't act safely, okay? Now, so the first 2 elements of any negligence case is you had a duty, but you breached that duty. Well, how big was that duty? How important was it? So these are issues that the courts face every day in trying to think about how high a burden we place on people to make something safe. And, eventually you go, okay, you breached your duty and it actually was the cause of the damages. Proximate cause means that the damages were foreseeable, that these things would occur, and that actually they were damages. And if you've done that, you've proven your negligence case. Now, what's significant here is that about 80, 100 years ago, there was a court case that said, you know what? Yeah, how do we calculate the level of burden or duty that we place on someone? And there's a formula in law called PGB, the probability of the harm times the gravity of the harm is equal to the burden that the person has to either act safely or make something safe, okay? So PGB, and that, I'll give you an example of that. In PGB, you can have a high probability but a low gravity, a high gravity but low probability, and or something in between, and it's going to work out into a common sense, what burden do we put on people? And some examples of that are going to be, for example, public utilities companies. For example, a electric company that has a power transformer in the middle of a public park, where you've got, fill in the blank, 50,000 volts, watts, or whatever of power on an electric transformer. And let's see, what's the probability in a public park that little kids are present? What's the probability that when they say a little thing in the middle of the park, hear it humming and buzzing, they're going to be interested in it? All of a sudden, you've got a high probability and a high gravity. So what you do is there's great burdens and duties that are put on public utility companies to, cage up those transformers, to make sure they're locked up, to regularly inspect them, that nobody is cut through the chains. Why? Because you're talking about life and limb here for the individuals. Or driving in the middle of a neighborhood. Fact is that you live in a residential neighborhood. What's the probability that little children are going to be present? High. What's the probability that if you drive at 80 miles an hour in a residential neighborhood, kids might run out into the street, right? And you could, again, kill them, hurt people. Yeah, so again, we have speed limits that correspond to, appropriate areas like residential areas. So those are examples where, probability and gravity come together and produce great burdens. Or it could be, what's the probability for you Star Trek fans here that the Borg actually exist? Okay. And those of you who aren't Star Trek fans, they're these, evil bunch of people that assimilate every culture and make them slaves and so on and so forth. Well, the gravity is pretty high, but the probability is pretty low. So guess what? NASA and the U.S. government doesn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about whether or not to have precautions against the Borg. So that's an example of, high gravity and almost zero probability that would go on. So this is the way that the PGB formula actually works. Now let's transfer this to duty of intellectual inquiry. Now, in a duty of intellectual inquiry, you think about this: the probability that the proposition is true versus the gravity that the proposition is true. What is your burden or duty of inquiry based on that analysis? Now, you really think about this: probability versus the times the gravity equals the burden. Well, let's start with gravity of the Christian faith. Really think about its claims. These are ultimate in gravity. You're talking about, for salvation, forgiveness, reconciliation with God, eternal blessedness. I mean, that is infinity, okay, gravity for good. Or what you've got is shame, guilt, pain, punishment for all eternity. That's infinite gravity for on the negative side. So we got the gravity part down because the issues here are eternal ones and of ultimate either blessedness or pain and suffering. So now you get to the probability part. Now here's the point. Let's say you just did to the best of your ability, use your biblical studies and theology, explain the faith. You used all of your apologetics and science of religion training, answered all the possible objections, and let's say someone's at, okay, I've got a reasonable suspicion that Christianity is true. Okay, probability 25%, gravity infinity. Now, what would that translate into? Okay, let me give you the translation. Okay, instead of considering grave eternal consequences, let's think of grave temporal consequences. So let's say that right now we get a phone call in the middle of this lecture, and it's from Campus Safety, and they say, we just got a phone call. Someone had one of your classes, Lewis, said you were horrible, gave them a bad grade, and said, we just, in the DL studio, we just put 100 pounds of C4 explosives, and it's going to go off in 5 minutes. That's what the person said. Now, let's calculate the gravity of that. Okay, 100% temporal, physical gravity, you're going to be dead if you don't get out and it's true, and the bomb goes off. But, Campus Safety said, based on, everything we know about these things, we only give it a 25% chance that it's actually true. So the question is, based on a 25% possibility or certainty that the bomb threat is true, how many people are staying in the room? And the answer is nobody. So how about a 5% chance? Who's staying in the room? Nobody. So these are the kinds of things when you have issues of ultimate gravity, which people understand bomb threats, they don't care if there's only a 1% chance that it's true. They're leaving the room until the bomb squad comes in, searches every inch of the room, and makes sure that there's no bomb there. So this is why, again, now to put it onto eternal terms, you got a 25% possibility, or you've 25% certain that Christianity is true, you better stop doing what you're doing right now, because as the late, great Dr. Walter Martin says, everyone's got one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. So you better stop and start investigating whether or not this is true, because it's the most important thing and even greater than a bomb threat. So to finish this PGB formula, again, you can also apply this to just about every area in apologetics or ethics. So you think about how you might use this in other areas of apologetics and ministry, such as pro-life ministry. So we think about bioethics, and I teach in the area of bioethics sometimes, is that, think about it, all right, when you are thinking about pro-life, what's the real issue? The real issue is human personhood. So from there, giving you the quick and short version here, is that what we need to do biblically is that we use essential personhood as a concept and analysis, that you are a full human person by your very essence from the moment of conception. We're not looking at every possible function you could do at the moment, which is the vast majority of secularists and progressives would have a functionalist view of personhood. We're looking at an essentialist view, which is from the moment of conception, what needs to be added to that conceptus, to that sperm and egg that came together. Now you have cell division, and from Christian theology, it's and philosophy, and from the sciences, from biology and so forth. What we have is a genetically complete individual that is distinct from the mother or the father, and what we have is something that is alive and not dead. And so we think about this. This is why we don't want to end up in scientism, where allegedly only the physical sciences give us knowledge. That's simply not true. Theology gives us knowledge. Philosophy gives us knowledge. Law gives us knowledge. Psychology gives us knowledge. It's not just the physical sciences. So with that, the fact is we have really good reasons to believe that a human soul is a complete soul with all its faculties and operating from the moment of its existence. B, when we start to see something like cell division, when that sperm and egg come together, we talk about the gametes that come together and give it a complete genetic code and structure, what we see is that the cell division is an effect. Every effect has to have a cause. So we could take a single complete cell with all the DNA and genetic structure from any individual human being, but it doesn't start to divide and make a new human body. So what's the most, again, what is the most reasonable thing to believe is that that effect is produced by a cause, and that the cause is the uniting of a complete personal human soul with that body. And given that what every other human being needs to continue to live, food, air, water, time, and protection, that either if it's one-celled or two-celled, what you have is a full human person in a particular stage of development. So whether it's a day old, 5 days old, whether it's a toddler, a 5-year-old, the fact is every human being continues to grow and simply works out and lives and continues your DNA, your genetics. You'll go from being a toddler to a 5-year-old to an 18-year-old to an old coot like me someday. So, but the fact is that no additional genetic material is added after conception. Now, I was in a legal seminar one time, and I was defending the pro-life view, and I used this PGB formula with my other, law students at that point to make the case, because the fact is that, look, if you're just 25% convinced that there's personhood from conception, see, now we run this through the grid, and here's what you get. What's the gravity if you are just doing, abortion on demand? You're intentionally taking the human life, another human life with premeditation, malice aforethought, without mitigation, justification, or excuse. The problem is people might do it in ignorance, saying, well, I'm not sure if it's a human person, so I'm going to take my chances. Well, good, then you end up in negligent homicide, right? But here's the point, is that gravity, we all know that human beings in the image of God are the most valuable beings that were created and in existence on this planet. We have dominion over the earth and so forth. and have a unique relationship with God. So even if you've got this, you've got some of the, again, grave, as far as like our bomb threat, you've got some of the gravest consequences. You have an unjustified killing of a human person. And so now, if you're only at a 25% probability, we should consider that like the bomb threat. So, which means what? We exercise caution. And I'll finish this segment with, and use this as an illustration, because I use this often when I deal with pro-abortion people, and it has to make them think about it. After I've given them all the evidence for personhood from conception, which is not just ontological personhood, but that would also translate into legal personhood. And legal personhood will entitle you to everything from protection under criminal law. You can't be raped, robbed, murdered, assaulted, battered, or anything else because you're a human person. Again, what's interesting is the disparity in the various areas of law. In most states, for example, in estate planning law, from the moment of conception, you can inherit property, but virtually up to the moment of birth, you can be aborted. So you could be considered a non-human person prior to your birth, but in estate planning law, you're a person from the moment of conception and eligible for inheritance. So this is why, again, ontological and essential personhood should always translate to legal personhood, and that way we get the protections of the human being. So I'll finish with this, is that think about this illustration. Let's say that you are a demolitions expert. Your company blows up buildings to make way for people to rebuild on a particular job site. So let's say now you went in and your company is that you've got some 30-story building downtown Manhattan, and all the charges are set. You're ready to go. You've got 15, 20 giant cranes, dump trucks. I mean, it's costing you $500,000 per hour to keep all this stuff on standby. So now you've got charges are set, you're ready to go, your foreman comes up and says, okay, we're ready. Then you're about ready to hook up the detonator, about ready to press the button, and all of a sudden, another person, one of the workers comes by and says, wait, don't press the button. Why? Because we did a check, but we just found a little pink tricycle parked in front of the entrance to the building, right in the entrance. It wasn't there 5 minutes ago. And like, oh man, okay. Well, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, time is money, man. It's costing me, $500,000 an hour to keep all this stuff on standby. We got a schedule here. I mean, the cops are waiting, everybody's waiting, the streets are blocked. You got all this stuff on standby. But no, we just found the tricycle in front of the building. So all your statisticians and bean counters said, you know what? We decided there's only a 49% chance that that girl is in the building. It's not even more likely than not. Any of you going to push the button and detonate the building? Yeah, no, okay. All right, let's go down 25%. All right, there's only a 25% chance that little girl is in the building. And you're like, anyone going to press the button? No. Which, by the way, in the legal seminar I was in, all of my progressive, more pro-abortion people, I'm pointing at, I'm going, you going to press the button? They're like, yeah, nobody was going to press the button. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, there is a 1% chance that little girl is in the building. Are you going to press the button? And they're all sitting there, these pro-abortion people cringing. They know they couldn't say yes. Why? Because what you've just done is remove the veil and say, you know what, because you're not dealing with potential human life, you're potentially dealing with an innocent human person's life. And see, what you draw out are those intuitions that people all have, is that when you're potentially dealing with an innocent human life, what's our standard? We exercise extreme caution. So what do we do ethically? What follows from that, from this PGB formula, because the gravity is so high and an innocent human life is at stake, you very carefully disconnect the detonator and you get all your people to go find that little girl, and you don't stop until you find her. And then you do another sweep of the property and say, okay, now we're clear. See, that's what an ethical person would do. But this is how, not only for evangelism, but even for ethical discussions and public policy discussions, you would use these levels of certainty and this PGB formula. So after this, now what you're going to do is, and we'll cover this online, look at the various arguments for the existence of God: cosmological arguments, teleological arguments, moral arguments, anthropological arguments. But what this will do is lay a foundation for you when, if you're going to give an argument, know what it means to have, what constitutes an argument, what constitutes proof, what constitutes level of persuasion, and then know how to really move someone to actually make a decision on this. Okay, next we're going to be moving on to Theology Proper Part 2, and we'll start looking at definitions, distinctions, metaphysical language that we'll be using throughout the rest of our study of theology. Okay, see you then.